When we think of classical music, we tend to picture a pretty specific, a very European history, right? But what if I told you that whole symphony is actually unfinished, that some of its most amazing parts were written by American composers whose voices were almost completely lost to time? Well, let's dive in and uncover this incredible, almost forgotten story.
Wow. I mean, this one sentence, it just says it all, doesn't it? It was written by the composer Florence Price in a letter to a conductor, and it cuts right to the absolute heart of our story. It's just a brutally honest look at the huge barriers she and so many others were up against in a world that just wasn't ready to listen.
And that really leads us to the big question here. How does a genius just get erased? To figure that out, we've got to go back, way back, to the turn of the 20th century, to a man most of us have heard of, but maybe not for the reasons we should have. Okay, so let's start with a name you definitely know, Scott Joplin. He was a complete musical revolutionary, but his biggest, grandest dream was one that the world just flat out refused to see.
Joplin absolutely earned his title, the King of Ragtime. No question. But here's the thing that often gets missed. He had deep classical training. For him, ragtime wasn't just fun music for a bar. No, he saw it as a serious American art form, something that could stand right alongside a European mazurka or a waltz.
So his maple leaf rag, it was a total phenomenon. It made him famous, sure, but it also set a whole new standard for the genre. But for Joplin, this was just a stepping stone. His real ambition went way beyond the piano bench. He wasn't satisfied with just writing short piano pieces. He wanted to create a huge, uniquely American opera.
And this is where the story gets really tragic. He poured his heart and soul into Tremonia. It was this groundbreaking story all about the power of education in the Black community. But he couldn't get a publisher. The world just wasn't ready for a Black composer's grand opera. So it was never fully staged while he was alive. His greatest work went unheard. So Joplin's story really shows us that even being famous couldn't overcome the massive barriers of the time. But he wasn't alone in this fight. Not by a long shot. Let's turn to another composer now, a woman who, against every single odd, managed to break through one of the highest ceilings in the classical music world. Just take a look at this incredible journey of Florence Price. She was a child prodigy, but she had to literally hide her identity, pretend to be Mexican just to get into one of the best music schools in the country. Her family, like so many others, had to flee the horrible racism of the Jim Crow South, and they landed in Chicago. And it was right there, during the Chicago Black Renaissance, that she created the piece of music that would make history. Now just look at that year, 1933. We're in the middle of the Great Depression. It's the Chicago World's Fair, and something absolutely monumental is about to happen. This was it. This was the moment. A major American orchestra playing a symphony written by a Black woman. Her symphony in E minor wasn't just some beautiful piece of music. It was a profound statement. It blended that grand European tradition with the soul of African American spirituals, and it created something brand new. Something that was truly, truly American. You would think, right? You would think a breakthrough like that would lock in her legacy forever. But incredibly, her story, and a ton of her music, it almost disappeared completely. After she died in 1953, Florence Price's work was just largely forgotten. New musical styles were coming in, and the people in charge of the classical music world, the gatekeepers, they just moved on. Her manuscripts got scattered and her name just faded away from the very concert halls she had fought so hard to get into. For decades, it really seemed like that was the end of the story. But then came this year, 2009, and with it, one of the most amazing discoveries in modern music history. Okay, picture this. A couple is renovating this old rundown house they just bought. And it turns out, this house used to be Florence Price's summer home. And as they're working, they find boxes and boxes and boxes of papers. And it was an absolute treasure trove. We're not just talking letters here. We're talking dozens of musical scores that everyone thought were lost forever. We're talking entire symphonies, concertos, a lifetime of pure genius just sitting in a decaying house so close to being destroyed and forgotten for good. As the New Yorker later put it, that house is a potent symbol of how a country can forget its cultural history. And that just hits the nail on the head. The rediscovery of all this music wasn't just about finding new pieces to listen to. It forced us to take a hard look at who we decide to include in our history books and in our concert halls.
And that discovery proves that these aren't just stories about the past. Oh no. The legacy of pioneers like Joplin and Price is very much alive today, and it's being carried on by a whole new generation of composers.
I mean, you have composers like Jessie Montgomery and Tanya Leon who are just continuing this incredible work. They're weaving together all these different influences, they're challenging conventions, they're winning Pulitzer Prizes, they're completely reshaping what classical music sounds like in the 21st century, making sure that chorus of voices just keeps getting bigger and louder. And that kind of brings us to our final thought here. The stories of Scott Joplin and Florence Price, they show us that our musical history is so much richer and way more complex and, frankly, more American than we were ever taught. Their work isn't just a little footnote. It's a foundational, essential part of the story. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other masterpieces are still out there, just waiting to be found?